The night my mother-in-law kicked me out of my own home. I was 8 months pregnant, the porch light was buzzing over my head, and the rain had started falling so hard it sounded like fists against the roof. Patricia stood in the doorway with her arms folded, her lips pressed into a smile that had never once been kind to me. My suitcase sat at her feet, dripping water onto the hardwood floor she had always claimed was family property. Even though every monthly payment had come out of my husband's account and half of the down payment had come from my father. "You heard me, Hannah," she said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear if they were looking out their windows. "You need to leave. Tonight." I stared at her, one hand braced under my belly, feeling my son kick as if even he knew something was wrong. "I'm 8 months pregnant." Her smile widened. "Then you should have thought about that before you started lying your way into this family." My stomach went cold. "What are you talking about?" She tilted her head toward the street, where a dark sedan was idling under the oak tree. "Trevor is moving in tomorrow. Since Ethan is gone and this house needs a real Reed inside it, I've decided to make the transition early." I laughed once, because I honestly thought I had misheard her. "You decided?" "Ethan trusts me." "That's funny," I said, my voice shaking now. "Because Ethan owns this house with me." Patricia actually snorted. "Not for much longer." She reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a folded paper, waving it in front of my face like a threat. "A notarized family agreement. My husband's wishes. You have no legal standing here." I looked at the paper, then at her face, and in that one terrible second I understood that this had been planned. Not today, not this hour. This had been cooking for weeks, maybe longer. What Patricia did not know was that I had a second envelope in my purse, sealed in my father's handwriting, with my name written on the front in the careful block letters he used when he wanted me to pay attention. And my father had told me one thing before he died. He said, "Honey, if they ever try to push you out, don't panic. Open the envelope." So standing there in the rain, with my mother-in-law trying to throw me into the street while I carried her grandson in my body, I slipped a hand into my purse with shaking fingers and touched that envelope like it was the only solid thing left in my life. But before I opened it, before I made a single move, I looked Patricia in the eye and said, "You're really going to do this while Ethan's away?" She gave me a look full of pure, ugly satisfaction. "Your husband," she said, "is exactly where he belongs. Away from all this drama." It would take me another 3 days to understand just how deep her lie went. 3 months earlier, I had still believed Patricia was just difficult. Not kind, not warm, but difficult in the way some mothers-in-law are difficult. Too opinionated, too nosy, too quick to criticize the way you folded towels or seasoned chicken. The kind of woman who made little comments like, "Ethan always preferred his mashed potatoes without all that garlic." Or, "A cleaner house helps a baby come out calm." Annoying, yes. Cruel, I told myself. Maybe not. Then Ethan got sent out of state for work. He was a project manager for a construction company, and when a bridge contract in Missouri fell apart, they asked him to oversee the emergency rebuild. He kissed me goodbye on a Tuesday morning, one hand on my swollen belly, and promised it would only be 6 weeks. "We'll get through it," he said. "Mom said she'd check on you." That was the first mistake. The first week, Patricia brought over soup, a set of tiny knitted socks, and a smile so stiff it looked painful. By week 2, she was complaining about my prenatal vitamins. By week 3, she was insisting I rest too much. By week 4, she had started talking about the family line, like I was just a temporary guest at its table. "Ethan needs a son," she said one afternoon while standing in my kitchen, looking at the ultrasound photo on the fridge. "A boy to carry the Reed name." I blinked at her. "He's carrying the Reed name either way." She looked at my stomach as if she could already see through it. "We'll see." There was something in the way she said it that made my hands go cold. Not concern, not curiosity, suspicion. I should have understood then that Patricia had already decided my child was a threat. My father noticed before I did. Dad had always been the kind of man who heard what people weren't saying. He spent 30 years working in probate court, then retired and took up estate consulting part-time because, as he liked to put it, people are careless with the truth when there's money involved. He and Patricia only met a few times, but after my wedding, he called me on a Sunday night and asked, Honey, does your mother-in-law always look at you like you're standing in her way? I'd laughed then. She's just protective. There was a pause on the line, and then he said, protection and possession are not the same thing. I didn't know it yet, but that sentence was the reason I was still alive emotionally by the time that rain-soaked night came. After Dad died, I was too deep in grief to process much of anything. He'd had a heart attack in his sleep in February, so sudden and clean the doctors called it merciful. I called it cruel. I still did. He had been my safest person, the one who always called on Sundays to ask what I ate, how I slept, whether Ethan was treating me well, whether I was remembering to drink enough water for the baby. At his funeral, after everybody else had left, his attorney, Miss Ruiz, put a plain black envelope in my hands and told me not to open it until the right time. What does that mean? I asked. She gave me a sad, knowing look. Your father said you would know. For 3 months, that envelope stayed in my dresser drawer, while Patricia's behavior got worse. Then came the little accidents. My prenatal appointment reminder disappeared from the fridge. My car keys were misplaced twice. One afternoon, I found my credit card cut cleanly in half and lying on the kitchen counter with a note in Patricia's handwriting that said, "You should be spending less anyway." When I called Ethan, he sounded tired and distracted. He kept saying his mom was helping out and that I needed to try to keep the peace. Keep the peace? I said into the phone one night. Sitting alone in the nursery, we had started painting pale yellow. Your mother told me the baby needs a real Reed name, like she's planning a royal succession. Ethan sighed. She doesn't mean it that way. Yes, she does. She's old school. I stared at the wall, at the rows of tiny painted stars I'd brushed on one by one, while I waited for him to come home. Ethan, I think she's trying to make me feel unwelcome in my own house. He was quiet for a second. That doesn't sound like Mom. There are some sentences that break trust in a relationship, and that was one of them. Not because he defended her, but because he made me feel like I was speaking a language he'd decided not to understand. From then on, Patricia became bolder. She started accidentally moving my things. She opened mail addressed to me. She referred to the baby as the child, or that baby, instead of by name, even though Ethan and I had already decided on a name together if it was a boy. When I asked her to stop, she laughed and said, "Names are earned." Then one Friday, I came home from the grocery store and found Trevor sitting in my living room, feet on the coffee table, eating chips out of a bowl I had bought with my own money. Trevor was Patricia's nephew, a man in his late 30s with a too smooth smile and eyes that never seemed to focus on anything long enough to mean it. He had been between places for years, which in his family translated to unemployed, drifting, and willing to smile at anyone who might give him free housing. Patricia stood beside him like a proud queen presenting an heir. "Trevor's staying with us for a while," she announced. "Us?" I repeated. "He can help once the baby arrives," Patricia said. "Men should be around to handle things." I looked at Trevor. "There's a guest hotel 3 blocks away." He grinned. "I like family better." "No," I said flatly. "You like free rent better." Patricia's face hardened. "Hannah, don't Patricia me." My blood pressure had been climbing for a week, and I could feel it pounding behind my eyes. "This is my home." She actually took a step closer to me. "This house has been in the Reed family for 32 years. Then maybe Ethan should have signed a deed to your personality when we got married." I shot back, because pregnancy had stripped me of patience and left me with only truth. Trevor laughed. Patricia did not. That night, I heard them talking in the kitchen, after I'd gone upstairs. I was only there because I had forgotten my water glass and came down barefoot to get it. The house was quiet except for their voices, low and sharp. I stopped at the top of the stairs when I heard my name. "She's too comfortable," Patricia said. "Then make her uncomfortable," Trevor replied. "After the baby is born, Ethan will be too distracted to question anything. All we need is for her to feel unstable." I went still. Trevor said, "And the property?" Patricia's voice went softer, which somehow made it worse. "Once I have the right paperwork, it can be moved into the family trust. Ethan won't fight me if he thinks it's for the baby's future. Does he know? He doesn't need to know until it's done." My mouth went dry. I stood there gripping the banister so hard my knuckles hurt. Then Patricia said the sentence that made me understand exactly how far she was willing to go. If she loses the baby, even better. Ethan will come home broken, and broken men sign anything. I can't explain the sound that came out of me then. It wasn't quite a gasp, not quite a cry. It was the sound of my body realizing it was in danger before my mind was ready to accept it. The floorboard creaked under my foot. Their heads snapped toward the staircase. I didn't wait. I ran back upstairs so fast my lungs burned, locked the bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed with my hands over my stomach, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. I'm here." For the first time in my pregnancy, I slept with a knife on the nightstand. The next morning, I called Ethan and told him exactly what I had heard. There was a long silence on the line, and then he said, "Are you sure you didn't misunderstand?" I almost dropped the phone. "Misunderstand?" I repeated. "Ethan, I heard your mother and your cousin discussing how to make me feel unstable so they could take the house. They'd never do that." My throat tightened. "You believe them over me." "No, I just think—" "Don't you dare finish that sentence." He exhaled, and I could hear construction noise in the background. Voices shouting, metal clanging. "I think you're stressed." I laughed then, one hard, bitter sound. "You think I'm stressed because I'm 8 months pregnant and your family is plotting like a bad soap opera. Hannah, please don't do this now." "Do what?" "Make this bigger than it is." That was the moment I realized I was alone. Not physically. Not really. But emotionally, legally, maybe even financially. I was standing on one side of a cliff while everyone else in Ethan's family was standing on the other, waiting to see whether I'd fall. I hung up on him. By the time the weekend came, I could barely recognize my own life. Patricia had taken over the guest room as if she owned it. Trevor was moving around the house at all hours, pretending to fix things while actually digging through drawers. Dana, Patricia's daughter, had arrived too, claiming she was just stopping by to help. Dana was even worse than Patricia in some ways because she smiled while she cut you. She would put a hand on my belly and say things like, "Poor little guy, growing up without a real stable foundation." Or, "I hope Ethan's not too disappointed if the timing of this baby gets questioned." I finally snapped one afternoon when she said, "You know, a lot of women mistake stress for labor. It's probably safer if you stay calm." "Safer from what?" I asked. She looked directly at me and smiled. "From causing yourself problems." I took one step toward her, and Patricia's voice cracked through the room. "Enough." I turned to her. "Tell me I'm imagining this." Her expression was ice. "You are overreacting, and you know what happens when pregnant women get dramatic." I stared at her. "What happens?" She glanced toward my belly. "Things go wrong." I swear to God, I felt something inside me shift at that moment. Not the baby. Something older, stronger, a part of me that had spent months trying to be polite, trying to be reasonable, trying to stay the daughter-in-law who didn't cause trouble. That part of me died on that spot. I went upstairs, packed a small bag, and pulled my father's black envelope out of the dresser drawer. My hands were shaking so badly I tore the edge when I opened it. Inside was a single letter in his handwriting and a set of copied legal documents bound together with a paperclip. The letter began, "If you are reading this, then Patricia has done exactly what I feared she might do." My breath caught. I sat down on the bed and kept reading. He wrote that over the years he had seen more family estates destroyed by greed than by lawsuits. He said Patricia Reed was one of the few women he had ever met who looked at a house and saw not home but leverage. Then he told me something that made my heart slam against my ribs. He had once witnessed a secret amendment to Arthur Reed's will. Arthur, Ethan's father, had made a revised will 6 months before his death. In it, the house was left not to Patricia, not to Trevor, not to Dana, but to Ethan and his wife, in trust for their children. If Ethan was unavailable or pressured, the property was to remain protected until the child reached adulthood, with me as guardian of residence. My father had notarized the copy, and in a second document, he had arranged a personal inheritance for me through a trust my grandfather had established years earlier and never spoken about because, in his words, "I wanted you to have it when you needed it, not when they wanted you dependent." The amount was enough to buy a smaller home outright. Enough to pay legal fees, enough to leave if I had to. I sat there crying so hard I could barely breathe. At the bottom of the letter, one line was underlined twice. Do not tell them what you know until they force your hand. I folded the letter back up and pressed it to my chest. The next morning, I made a call to Miss Ruiz. She remembered me immediately. I hoped you wouldn't need this file, she said when I explained who I was. You knew? I asked. I knew your father was preparing for the possibility that someone would confuse family with ownership. A bitter laugh came out of me. That's exactly what's happening. She didn't waste time. Then listen carefully. Bring me everything you have, and do not let anyone know you're speaking with me. I'm sending a certified copy to a probate attorney in Columbus this afternoon. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. How bad is this? Bad enough that if Patricia has acted on the house without authorization, she may have exposed herself to fraud. Fraud. The word felt sharp and clean. Real. Consequences had a shape now. I should have felt relief immediately, but that night Patricia made her move. I came home from a doctor's appointment feeling drained and nauseous, only to find all my things packed in cardboard boxes by the front door. Not carefully, not respectfully, just dumped, as if I were garbage taking up space. I stood in the entryway, stunned. Patricia appeared from the hallway with Trevor behind her like a shadow. Oh, good. You're back. We were wondering if you'd left already. I looked at the boxes. What is this? She folded her arms. A clean break. You packed my things. You were cluttering up the house. It's my house too. Trevor gave a low, mocking whistle. That's adorable. I turned to Patricia, my voice shaking. Ethan is going to lose his mind when he finds out what you've done. Patricia smiled coldly. Ethan already knows you've been unstable. I told him you had another crying fit at the doctor's office and that you're not sleeping well. I actually took a step back. You called him? Oh, yes, she said. He was very concerned, but he also agreed it might be best if you went somewhere quieter until after the baby. I couldn't believe the audacity. You lied to him. I protected him from your tantrum. I stared at her face and felt my own anger turn crystal clear. What did you tell him exactly? She shrugged. That you're overwhelmed, emotional, too fragile for conflict. I nodded slowly, because suddenly I understood something. Ethan hadn't just been ignoring me. He had been fed a story. Patricia had taken my pain and packaged it as hysteria. She saw the look on my face and misread it as surrender. Go on, she said. Take your things and find somewhere else to stay for the next few days. Trevor will be moving into the master suite tonight so we can have room for the baby preparations. I almost laughed. The master suite? You've occupied it long enough. That was when my phone buzzed in my hand. Miss Rouse. I answered and put it on speaker without taking my eyes off Patricia. Miss Carter, she said, using my maiden name the way legal professionals do when they need you to listen. I'm outside your house with a probate attorney and a courier. Do not sign anything. Do not leave. Patricia went pale so fast it was almost beautiful. I just smiled. What did you say? Patricia demanded. I held the phone up. I said, you picked the wrong woman to bully. Miss Ruiz's voice continued through the speaker. Mrs. Reed, if you are in possession of any documents related to this property, you will need to produce them immediately. A certified copy of the will has been filed. Any unauthorized attempt to transfer or repossess the residence will be treated as interference with an estate matter. Trevor's grin vanished. Patricia blinked like she'd been slapped. This is nonsense. Then there was another voice from the phone, deeper and sharper. Mom. My heart stopped. Ethan. Patricia's mouth opened and closed. Ethan? Why are you? I'm standing in my own driveway, he said. And there was a fury in his voice I had never heard before. And my pregnant wife is on speaker telling me she was just kicked out of my house. Patricia spun toward the window as if she could somehow make the world disappear. He doesn't understand, she said, but her voice had lost its certainty. Ethan, I said softly, because suddenly I was crying again. But now it was different. She's been lying to you. There was a brief silence. Then he said, I know. That one word nearly made my knees buckle. He came in through the front door 30 seconds later, still wearing the wrinkled work shirt he'd driven 18 hours in. His face looked exhausted and older than it had the last time I saw him, But the second his eyes found mine, something in him broke open. "Hannah!" he breathed, and crossed the room to me so fast I thought he might trip. I started crying harder. "You're here. I'm here." He wrapped both arms around me carefully, like I was made of glass and lightning at the same time. One hand went to my belly, and the baby kicked hard against his palm. Ethan shut his eyes. "I'm so sorry." Behind us, Patricia made a sharp, angry noise. "Ethan, don't do this. She's manipulating you." He turned slowly to face his mother. "No, Mom, you did that." She looked stunned. "Excuse me? You told me Hannah was overwhelmed. You told me she was unstable, that she wanted to keep me from helping you, that she was making things up. You told me she needed space. I was protecting you. From my wife? From what she's turning you into." Ethan gave a humorless laugh. "You mean an adult who can read legal documents?" Patricia flinched as if he had struck her. Miss Ruiz and the probate attorney, Mr. Vale, came in behind him with a courier carrying a thick folder. The house suddenly felt smaller, the air denser, as though the truth had walked in and rearranged the furniture. Mr. Vale addressed Patricia first. "Mrs. Reed, as of this afternoon, the trust governing this property has been activated for review. You were given no authority to issue an eviction or transfer possession." Patricia's face tightened. "There was a family agreement." "There is no valid family agreement," he said. "There is, however, a certified copy of Arthur Reed's amended will, properly witnessed and notarized, in which the residence passes to Ethan Reed and Hannah Reed as tenants by trust, with protection for the unborn child." Dana, who had been hovering near the hallway like a spectator at a car crash, suddenly blurted, "That's impossible." Miss Ruiz looked at her with cold precision. "Your uncle's will also includes a clause stating that any person who concealed or interfered with the probate documents may forfeit their claim to all discretionary assets held in the family estate." Trevor went white. Patricia's breathing changed. I could hear it from across the room, too fast and shallow now. The sound of a woman realizing she'd built her whole plan on a lie and had just watched the floor vanish beneath her feet. "I didn't conceal anything," she said. Miss Ruiz opened the folder and slid a document onto the table. "Then perhaps you can explain why the original codicil was found sealed in a lockbox in the attic of this property, along with your handwritten notes suggesting you intended to restructure the house for Trevor before Ethan returned." The silence after that was glorious. Patricia stared at the page as if she could will it to disappear. I looked at her, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I felt sorry for her. Not enough to forgive her. Not nearly enough for that, but enough to see the truth. She had looked at my pregnancy and seen weakness. She had looked at my grief and seen opportunity. She had looked at the unborn child in my body and seen a line item in a family ledger. And now, the ledger had come due. "You lied to Ethan," I said quietly. Patricia snapped her head toward me. "Don't you dare act righteous in my house." Ethan stepped in front of me instantly. "It's not your house anymore." That sentence hit her harder than anything else in the room. "This is my husband's home," she said, her voice rising now, desperation slipping through the cracks. "I buried him. I raised you in this house. I kept everything together after he died." Mr. Vale replied, "Your contributions to the household are not the issue. The issue is that you do not have the legal right to remove a protected resident from a trust property." Patricia pointed at me. "She's not protected. She's the problem." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Mom, stop." "No," she hissed. "You stop. She trapped you. She got pregnant too fast. She came in here with her sad little story about family and loyalty, and now she thinks she can take everything." I felt my hands tremble, but I held her gaze. "Your own husband didn't trust you with the house, Patricia. That should have told you something." She went dead still. That was when I knew the codicil had landed exactly where it needed to. Arthur Reed had not been a perfect man. He had been quiet, tired, and too often absent in the way some fathers are when they don't know how to stand up to the louder person in the room. But before he died, he had seen enough to protect his son and the wife his son chose, and he had done it in secret. Miss Ruiz read the relevant section aloud, her voice calm and merciless. "In the event that my wife, Patricia Reed, Attempts to transfer, sell, withhold, or otherwise alter the occupation of this residence contrary to the wishes of my son and his spouse, the property shall remain under trust control for the benefit of Ethan Reed, Hannah Reed, and their children, until such time as the youngest child reaches legal adulthood. No individual family member may remove the spouse from the premises without court approval. Patricia made a small sound. Not quite a cry. "This is insane," she whispered. "No," I said, my own voice steady now. "What's insane is trying to kick a pregnant woman into the street because you wanted your nephew to have a free house." Trevor muttered. "I didn't know it was that serious." Everyone looked at him. He lifted both hands. "I was just told to come by." Patricia rounded on him in fury. "Shut up!" But the spell was broken. He was exposed now, small and ridiculous. Just another man happy to stand close to power until power started collapsing. Ethan turned to him. "Get out." Trevor blinked. "What?" "Get out of my house." He looked at Patricia for help, but she didn't have any left to give. Dana was already backing toward the door, face pale, pretending she had never said a cruel thing in her life. Patricia looked at Ethan with wet eyes I had probably once mistaken for love. "You're choosing her over your own mother?" Ethan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and devastated. "I'm choosing the truth." That was the end of it. Not neatly, not all at once, but enough. The courier handed Patricia the notice of no contact pending probate review. The attorney explained that any further attempt to remove me would be documented. Miss Ruiz told me my father's trust account would be released within 48 hours. Ethan, still stunned, stood by my side and listened while Patricia argued, pleaded, then finally collapsed into the kind of silence that happens when a person realizes manipulation has met a wall. She left the house before midnight. Dana left with her. Trevor left carrying a trash bag full of whatever dignity he had left, which wasn't much. The next morning, I sat in the kitchen with Ethan and a cup of ginger tea while sunlight fell across the same table where Patricia had once told me not to waste my money on fancy baby stuff. He looked wrecked. "I should have listened to you." "Yes," I said, because he needed truth, not comfort. "You should have." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know." I studied his face. I wanted to hate him in that moment. And maybe a part of me did. Not because he'd done this to me, but because he had made me beg for belief when I should have been protected without question. "I'm still here," I said finally, one hand resting on my belly. "But don't confuse that with everything being fine." "I don't," he said. "I swear I don't." And for the first time, I believed he understood the distance between regret and repair. The consequences came faster than Patricia expected. Once Mr. Vale filed the trust documents and the certified probate copy, her story collapsed. The legal notes she'd scribbled in the attic box were enough to show intent. The judge didn't just deny her claim to the property, he ordered a review of the family estate and a formal accounting of all documents she had withheld. Miss Ruiz told me later that Patricia was furious because she had assumed old family habits would protect her. They didn't. Money moved. Claims dissolved. The transfer she had tried to prepare for Trevor never happened. The house stayed exactly where Arthur's final wishes placed it, with Ethan, me, and our child. I never saw Trevor again after the hearing. Dana sent one text that read, "This is so unfair," as if fairness had ever once been her concern. Patricia tried to call Ethan 17 times over 2 days. He didn't answer. Eventually, she sent me a message instead. I read it once. It said, "You should be ashamed for tearing this family apart." I stared at the screen, then deleted it without replying. Because here's the thing, nobody tells you about surviving betrayal while pregnant. The victory doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like blood pressure dropping. It feels like finally sleeping through the night. It feels like sitting on your own couch without flinching when footsteps happen in the hall. It feels like your baby kicking inside you while sunlight comes through the curtains your mother-in-law once said were too expensive. My father's trust funded the nursery exactly the way I wanted it. I painted the walls a soft gray blue. Ethan hung the shelves. We bought the rocking chair I'd been eyeing for months. I kept Arthur Reed's framed will in a drawer because I didn't need to look at it anymore to know the truth had won. 3 weeks later, I went into labor at 2, 14 inches the morning. Ethan drove like a man possessed. He held my hand in triage and whispered apologies between contractions. And I let him. Because forgiveness, like birth, is not something you force. It arrives when the body is ready. Our son was born just after dawn, loud and furious and healthy. The nurse laid him on my chest, and for a moment the whole world went quiet. He had Ethan's nose and my chin and a grip that felt impossibly strong for something so small. When he opened his eyes, I started crying so hard I couldn't talk. Ethan kissed my forehead and whispered, "He's beautiful." I looked at our son, then at the man beside me, then out the hospital window where the morning light was turning everything gold. "He's safe," I said. That word meant more than the others. Safe. Not just alive. Not just born. Safe from being treated like property. Safe from the poison of people who think blood gives them ownership. We named him Samuel Arthur Reed. Samuel for my father. Arthur for Ethan's. Because truth deserves to be remembered. Patricia never came to the hospital. I later heard she had told relatives that I had forced the whole thing for sympathy. Nobody believed her anymore. Not after the documents. Not after the judge. Not after the way she'd spent years confusing control with love and lost, both in one brutal afternoon. A month later, Ethan and I sat on the porch at sunset with our son asleep between us, and the house was finally quiet in the way a home should be. He took a breath and said, "I know I can't undo what happened." "No," I said, "but I can stay. Really stay. No excuses. No letting anyone come between us again." I looked at him for a long time before answering. "Then prove it every day," I said. "Because trust isn't something you get back just because you apologized." He nodded. "I know." The baby stirred in my arms, made a tiny, soft sound, and settled again. And I thought about my father's envelope, about the quiet way he had protected me from beyond the grave, about Arthur Reed's hidden will, about all the women who had been told to be patient while someone else stole the room they were standing in. Patricia had tried to break me by using my pregnancy as weakness. Instead, she revealed the one thing she should have feared most. She gave me time to open the truth. And once the truth was open, there was no putting it back. In the end, she lost the house, the trust, the respect of her family, and the illusion that cruelty could stay hidden forever. I kept my home. I kept my child. I kept the money my father had left to make sure I would never be trapped by anyone's greed again. But more than that, I kept my voice. And every night now, when I rock my son to sleep in the room Patricia once wanted for someone else, I remember the rain on that porch, the envelope in my hand, and the exact moment my life stopped being a battle for permission and became a promise I made to myself. No one was ever going to throw me out again.